there's a thing that happened in my world where I realized in my business, my dog daycare boarding and training facility, I realized that if I did not have a way to transfer my knowledge to my people, I was always going to be overworked, overwhelmed, and exhausted. And the tragedy that happened that made me realize this was the death of my first husband. Hi. So at the risk of boring you, I want to say that this episode of this podcast is about systems, potentially about standard operating procedures, which to most entrepreneurs and small business owners, unless you are of the DISC test, personality test, like a higher S and a higher C type of personality, if you're a higher D and a higher I, you may think what I'm talking about is like watching paint dry. But the reason I want to talk about systems such as standard operating procedures, processes that are in your business is because we don't like to think about those things until they break. And even sometimes our personal systems may break simply because of things that happen in life. And then the important things around us cannot or don't get taken care of because we may be the only person who knows how to do that specific thing. But before I do, go to 4dayprofitrace.com. That's the number 4, dayprofitrace.com, and get my free, totally free diagnostic course so you can make more money without working so dang hard. And it's super fast and super simple, and it's going to blow your mind. So that is number 4, dayprofitrace.com. So this episode is sponsored by connectexperts.io. That's experts with an X. Connect, Xperts.io. At Connect Experts, we help busy dog business owners get more leads and convert them without having to spend money they don't have on expensive ads. Go to Connect Experts, that's experts with an X.io to learn more. So I just saw this in a friend of mine on one of the social media platforms, unfortunately had sort of an injury, and then they slipped and fell and hit their head, and they had to go to the hospital. Now they had, at the time, only their personal dogs in their care, which was so lucky because they could have had a board and trained dog or boarding dogs in their care at the time. And so they got really lucky in that way. But they also had a dog, a personal dog, that's very hard to care for. So a lot of us in the industry will have dogs that maybe others couldn't adopt, or that got sent back, or that, we had a heart for and decided to take care of, that maybe what is actually a hard keep for an average person who doesn't know as much as you do. And so they had a friend who came in who was very dog savvy, came in and took that one dog to their home to care for. And they were very lucky in my experience to have that. But if they did not have that friend that was dog savvy to be able to help, it would have been almost impossible. So one of the things that happens in our worlds is when you're so good at something, you are unconsciously competent at it, meaning you do not have to think about what you're doing. You just do it, right? But the problem is when other people come in your world who are not as good at this thing as you are, you don't even realize how good you are at it because you don't even have to think about it anymore. Other people in your world may not have one clue about how to do what you do. And when you're healthy and everything's going well, that's fine. But when something happens, they are coming from what we call unconsciously incompetent, meaning they don't even know what they don't know. They have no idea what they don't know. They could not replicate what you do if you paid them until they learn how to do it. So I talk a lot with my clients. I have a whole program on this, or anybody who's in my world gets access to it, about how to set up what are called SOPs, standard operating procedures. Now I can see, some of you who are listening to this or watching this right now, your eyes just were like glazed over, like, what? Most boring thing on earth. Well, not really. They're actually one of the sexiest things on earth when we have them in place, because it means we no longer have to be the one doing all the things. So I hear a common refrain with small business owners, like, why don't they understand? Isn't common sense the common thing anymore? I'm like, common sense was never common. It's just that there were fewer people and people were more in line with, there were certain ways things had to be done. They just did them. And then the day and age of people do whatever they want, however they want, whenever they want came. And so what we thought was common sense just isn't there, because it wasn't even common to begin with. It was just sort of how people fell into line. So when we're running a business, it, in my opinion, would be most helpful if we were able to teach other people some of these basic things that we do without thinking, just in case someone else is going to have to do them at some point. So, if you're running your business solo, let's say you're a solo dog trainer or a solo dog groomer. Dog groomer might not be the same if you're solo, because maybe if you had something going on, you could just cancel all of your appointments. But if you were a dog trainer or a dog boarding facility, like if you're solo, how do you do that? If you had dogs that were boarding in your home, let's say you're an in-home boarder, or and you were doing it on your own and an accident happened, who would take care of those dogs in your absence? So I also have a free Facebook group called Dog Business Success Community, and I welcome you to join the community there. It's very supportive, and I have more free trainings and some amazing interviews with very successful dog business owners. Some are on building their third and more facility, many of them millionaires. Most of them started out with absolutely nothing. And so just go to Facebook and join my group, Dog Business Success Community. If you had the things that you do written down, processed out, meaning this is how we do this, even videos of how you do that available for someone else to access, it would make the transfer of the knowledge that much easier. Now, I was speaking yesterday to someone that I know very well who is an SEO expert, and he basically agreed with me on everything I've been teaching about SEO, and which made, I was like, oh, yes. But he said that people are really hungry for systems right now. And I thought that was interesting, because I didn't realize that, because a lot of the people that I speak to are like, oh, that just looks really boring. I know that's going to take a lot of time and effort to set up. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to take time and effort. But once it's done, even small pieces, once it's done, then you have a way to transfer some of your knowledge, not all of your knowledge. That's impossible. You're brilliant. But the pieces that another person could easily do, you're able to transfer that to someone else. And this is how we can start to step out of doing all of the things in our business. Now, I know it feels really good to be top dog, like the one in charge who knows everything. It's really like a lot of us are control freaks. We want to know how everything's done. We want to make sure it's done correctly. But we forget that when we are going to transfer some of our knowledge to someone else who could be helpful in our business, we want to do it in such a way that they're going to easily be able to do it. Now, I have an employee of when I sold my business in 2018, she stayed in my world. She did not work for the new owner. The person who bought my business was crazy pants. That's a whole nother story. Maybe I will tell that someday. Insane. I'll go by. I'm not going to say anything else. They've passed away since. I don't like to speak ill of the dead, but that person was literally crazy pants. So when I sold my business, didn't really know this about that person. Then they came in and my employees were like, whoa, what the heck? So this one person stayed in touch with me, and she's actually now my client. So she is amazing. But she has said to me more than once, Sherry, your SOPs are she had worked for 26 different companies from the age of 16 on. 26 different companies. Some of these companies were multinationals, meaning there were big companies. She did small jobs in them, but she worked for major companies. She worked for small companies. She worked for franchises. Not one of them, not one, had SOPs and a training of new hires down the way my company did. And that just every time I hear that, I have to smile because I'm like, you know what? I there's a thing that happened in my world where I realized in my business, my dog daycare boarding and training facility, I realized that if I did not have a way to transfer my knowledge to my people, I was always going to be overworked, overwhelmed, and exhausted. And the tragedy that happened that made me realize this was the death of my first husband. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but I was sort of taken out of my business for almost 6 months because of everything that happened with that. It's quite a ridiculous story, looking back on it now, but at the time it was very difficult. And when I woke up out of that, I realized I have got to buckle down and get SOPs, systems, processes, standard operating procedures for everything we do in this company down. Thank goodness my employees were able to hold the business down. But during that time, it just made me realize that if I want to really be able to step away and have it run just as well as it does when I'm there or when a great manager is there, I really need to be able to teach people in a way that they can learn the information such that nobody has to be nagging them or on top of them all of the time. So I created with my organizer at the time, she happened to also be a person who loved to create operations manuals. And so we sat together. It took us 18 months and I spent over $18,000 doing this, created a system where we can teach people what they need to learn, watch them do it back, and then give them a feedback, and then along the way track that they know how to do it. And it worked. It worked really, really well. And I still teach that to this day to anybody who is in my world because tragedies happen, accidents happen. But I want to tell you a story about where the first place I learned this, the idea of this was before I ever had a business. I was teaching English in Japan at the time, and I would come back to the United States and I would buy books I was flying Delta at the time. I'd fly from Japan to Portland, and there was bookstores in Portland. I would buy books there, ship them from Portland back to Japan in a big old book bag. And one book that I bought one year was called The E-Myth Revisited by a guy named Michael Gerber. And I did not have a business. I was teaching English in Japan. I was drinking a lot of beer, having a good time, learning Japanese, had a great life. But I bought that book and I read it on the airplane. I took it on the airplane, like going back and forth at one point. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if I ever had a business, I would want to set it up such that people know how to do the things that are important in the business. Well, I didn't do it when I opened my business. I opened my business and I was so busy out the gate. So much crazy stuff happened. I did not, to that like 6 years later, started 2005, opened my facility 2007, 2011, 2009, the tragedy happened. 2010, 2011 is when. So 5 or 6 years later is when I actually put into place what I had learned from Michael Gerber's book, but in my own way, in a way that worked for a business where people are really kinesthetic. They have to do things with their hands and their bodies, and they have to be very aware of what's going on around them at all times. So I'm grateful to that man for writing that book. And another book that I read along the way before I had a business actually was a book called The Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande, Dr. Atul Gawande. And it is a story about how hospitals, it's a long story, about hospitals decided that they had to put into place a checklist system for during, and after surgeries, because so many sponges and things were being left in people's bodies that they were dying. So get this, they did not have good SOPs in hospitals, standard operating procedures in hospitals, that could save a person's life until Dr. Gawande and his team of people from all around the world, all of these doctors, decided to set up a way to make an easy checklist, verbal and also checked off checklists, simple checklists. What were the most important things that they had to make sure of in any operating room around the world? Because SOPs matter. SOPs, standard operating procedures, save lives. And we are in this business that all of us are in. If you're working with dogs, you are working with a live animal. We need to have standard operating procedures. Even if you're solo, if you have dogs boarding with you, God forbid, if something happens to you, who is going to be able to step in and do the most important things to keep that dog safe until we can get an owner to come in or something? Like, who would they contact? What are the emergency contacts? Where does that information live? Who would be able to access that if you were not able to access it? Where are the notes on that dog? Where are the simple things we do, like how do we get them out of a crate? How do we get them back into a crate? Do we have to leash this dog? Is this dog even safe enough to be approached by a human they've never met before? Who would be our emergency person in the case that something did happen that could be able to safely do that for that dog? I'm just thinking like my worst nightmare dog training potential experiences in the past. But, people often don't realize that they wish they needed to have some sort of an SOP, a checklist, a how we do this thing is how we do this thing, no matter what training process for somebody else in their world to be able to handle it just in case, right? Like I have one of my clients building a great big, wonderful multi-million-dollar facility right now, finally got all of the permits through. That took 4 years. But when we first met, she's like, oh, I love this SOP thing. I'm going to see what I can put into place. Now, she at the time was boarding out of her home. So training, doing in-home training in other people's homes. And then people say, can you board my dog? Which is what happens with dog trainers. If you're a dog trainer, you know this. She had started to make baby SOPs because she's like, I'm going to see what this is like. And she had done a check, like how to, for her own dog, an older dog that had gone blind in both eyes and was also incontinent. So when she needed to be taken outside, at what intervals, because she was in charge of all the dog care, right? At what intervals she needed to be taken outside. At what intervals she might need to have a doggy diaper on. How was she fed? All of this stuff. So she made some baby SOPs for the one dog. Well, lo and behold, a family member got sick, unfortunately, and she had to leave to go take care of this family member. And she had left behind the SOP for caring for their own family dog, but she was the sole caregiver basically of that dog. And she came back from having to be away on an emergency and nothing went wrong. And her daughters and her husband were like, Mom, that was so easy to follow. Like how you told us to do this and then this, and then there was a little checklist. So easy to follow. So SOPs are for you. Systems, processes, procedures are for you, but more really, so for you to be able to pass your knowledge on, but also if anybody in your world, they are super helpful for. Like, how do you want that thing done? You want it done this way? Okay, let's do it that way. It takes the stress of having to control. So when we are control freaks, we stress ourselves out. When we have to be in control of everything and we give zero ability to someone else to be able to do some of the things, that is like a painful road to an early death. That makes people miserable, makes the people around you miserable, and it can make you can make yourself sick by being that way. If you can part with some of your knowledge on the steps it takes to do a thing, one thing, pick a thing, and learn how to teach that to somebody so that they can do it instead of you. Now you have done something that's called empowerment. You have empowered another person to do something that is important to you, and you don't have to do it anymore. So you've given a little of your power away, it might seem like, but no, you've given power to somebody else in a really wonderful way such that they can do the thing that before you were the only one that could do it. I speak to so many people who own some of these businesses who are in their 50s and 60s. They've been doing this for 20, 30 years, and they are wiped out. And they are like, nobody can do this but me. I'm like, that's not true. Once I built all of my systems out with the person who helped me, my SOPs, and we were able to train them really in specific ways to people such that they could learn them, and we could double check and test and make sure they really had the resources they needed to be able to do it. I was able to step away from my business and do the big thing that business owners in my mind could be doing, which is creating the vision for the business and how it's going to grow and how it's going to continue to serve all of its clients and the dogs in the business. When I was in my business all the time, I did not have time for that. And I also made myself sick. That's a whole other story that I can tell in a different podcast. But when we're able to teach how we do the things in the very basics of it to someone else who can do them for us, it is so freeing. There's so much more that you can start to look at and focus on, and not just keeping control of all of the things yourself. Not that you're doing that, but a lot of people that I know are. And so I just want you to think about the power of systems, the power of saying to people, hey, this is how we do it here. We're going to teach you so that you can do it that way. And then everybody's happy. The dogs are well cared for. The people know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. People want to know what they're supposed to be doing. So I talk to a lot of younger people because they interest me. It interests me what they think about where they work, because a lot of my business owners work with younger people, and I want to be able to impact them and be able to have conversation with them and work with them in a way where they feel empowered in their job. If they feel empowered in their job, they're going to stay with you longer. So a lot of them are like, wherever they work, I don't know, pick a place. It doesn't have to be dog. It could be some retail store. They're like, they gave me this job. I went in and they said, go do this, 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 and this. I'm like, how do I do that? They're like, you should figure it out. You're smart. Or watch them do it. Like, there are major corporations that do not have SOPs in place for training new hires. They just have to watch how someone else does it and then guess that that's how it's done. I can't imagine a more miserable place to work. No wonder people leave. Like, I watched someone who lived with us in the recent past, a family member, who was like, I don't even know what they want, and I got in trouble. I'm like, well, that's because that place does not have systems in place, and it's really sad, and they're going to go through people right and left. I watched another family member who worked several different jobs. Only one of them, and these are major companies, only one of them put this person through a proper training program when they first came on board. They were sent to study somewhere. All of it was paid for. They learned all of their processes, all of their system, all of the procedures, were tested on it, and then came back and were brought into a store and were able to do it. And that, when I walked into that store, it actually felt good in there as a customer. I went to, to get a feel for it. It felt good as a customer. It felt like everybody knew what they were supposed to do. There were people being proactive, like somebody was vacuuming. There was something over in the corner that they were dusting things. They were being really proactive, but it's because they'd been taught what they were expected to do in a way where they could learn it, because there's different learning styles. I teach about that deeply in my programs. If we teach the way we learned, which is often we were lectured to at a school, we were lectured to in classes. If we teach only by speaking, which I'm doing right now, I'm very aware of this, we're only going to impact the people that are very auditory. So this is why I love that videos now come out with captions on them. So for people who are not so I'm not very auditory. I would rather read a video than watch a video and listen to it. Honestly, I can read it faster. I'll speed it up. I'll read what they're saying. I'll read the transcript. I'll be through it in 5 minutes instead of having to watch for 20 minutes. I love that because I learn differently than people who learn auditorily. But when we can teach people in their learning modality, their learnings, how they learn, and we can break it down to the very basic components and pieces so that they can do it, learn it, and do it well, we are on the way to building an unstoppable business that you do not have to be there 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It is very freeing. So thank you for listening to my little rant on systems. I love them. I am not the kind of person that you would think. Like, if you met me, I'm very spontaneous for the moment. I'm super ADHD. And the idea of putting that all together was really exhausting for me. But once I did it and I had help doing it, and now I help others do it, I have everything already ready for people to do it if they have a dog business. Like, you can just swipe things and edit them your way and boom, you're done. But once I did it, my whole life changed. I was no longer like the boulder in the road blocking the way anymore. Like the systems did the work for me. My life just got so much easier. So think about it. Think about one thing that you could do in your business that you could write a process for, or bullet points, like the step 1, step 2, step 3. It could be as simple as when you answer the phone, what do you say? It could be that simple. What does your business say when you answer a text? What do you say? Like, what are the things that you ask? What are the questions that you traditionally ask? Anything. It could be when I am taking a dog out of a crate. This is the steps we go. There are steps to getting a dog out of a crate. When we put a dog into an enclosure, these are the steps we do. When we welcome a dog into our lobby, what are the steps that we go through? Like whatever you are doing, you're like, oh, that's so easy. Anybody should be able to do it. No, nobody can do it until you tell them how you want them to do it. Show them, see different learning styles, and have them show it back. Then you know you've got it for the most part until they forget and you remind them again kindly. All right. Thank you. Let me know in the comments if you're a systems lover or not. If you're not, you can grow to love them. They have changed my entire life. Right now, everything we do in my business, I no longer am working with dogs directly other than my own. Everything we do, we have SOPs for. As we do them, we create SOPs for them. Why? Because I know they work. If we need to be able to pass that information off to somebody, it's done. It's right there. Nobody has to guess. They know exactly what they have to do when. So think about it. All right. Take care. You have been listening to the Thriving Dog Business Podcast with Sherry Boyer, the 7-figure dog business owner. Subscribe to us to get more proven tips to boost your profits without working yourself into the ground. And we have new episodes every other week. To get clear on how to make more money in less time, go to 4dayprofitrace.com to get my exclusive free, very short course.